All Three Beards Media podcasts originate from the Gravitate Co-working Studio, sponsored by Revelton Distilling Company.
Hey, what is up, everybody? This is False Starts. Bill Blank, Chris Shipley. Bill, how are you tonight?
Swell. How are you, Chris?
Good. You know, that opening, two things. I got to get with the producer and turn that volume down. Holy smokes, that was loud. And also, I really want to find a video of you in your red jumpsuit that you wore at that benefit or at that thing with, with Willie Farrell. That's what I need. I need you in that red suit.
My Santa tracksuit.
You're saying a tracksuit. That's right.
Yeah, it's dope, dude. I wear that every Christmas. You know, I found that at Walmart.
I'm shocked.
I was on my way. I used to do every other Thanksgiving in Colorado Springs. And on my way out there, I stopped to get an oil change at Walmart, and I was walking around killing time, and I saw that tracksuit. It was in the pajama. You know, they have all the pajamas for Christmas. It was in there, so I bought it, and I wore it on stage all week. And so I've kind of done it ever since when I had shows during the holidays.
It's a beaut. I got to tell you that.
It's the Joey Claus. You've seen the Joey Claus videos. That's what Joey Claus wears.
Yep.
So that was the whole idea. That's where it all came from, and then I just wore it on stage for the hell of it. But yeah, I had a intro. I just I don't know if you can see my logo on my shirt over here.
Yeah.
The Remington Trophy logo. I performed at the festivities. I met Jackson. Jackson Powers Johnson is the name of the kid that won it, the center from Oregon.
Yeah.
And he was a cool kid. Looks like a baby. He looks like a giant baby. He's 20 years old. He's coming out early, going to the NFL. Looks like he doesn't even shave yet.
Really?
And but he's just huge.
Huh? Well, the Bears need a center, so maybe they'll draft him.
Maybe he was a nice kid. It'll be fun to watch the draft and like root for him to get drafted and watch.
Yeah, that'll be cool. Was that the one you had to go buy a suit for? You had to wear a suit?
It was, yeah. And I had to wear the suit. I didn't perform at the trophy presentation. I performed at the committee dinner the night before. So they have, their committee or whatever who puts everything together, and they hired Willie to perform at the trophy presentation. And then the committee itself, it's just like, those 20, 25 people have a dinner the Friday before in Omaha.
Yeah.
And so that's where I performed. And because of the weather, we drove up Thursday night and to avoid the weather. And Friday night was the dinner, and the restaurant closed where we were having the dinner. So I was supposed to have dinner in this private room in the restaurant and then perform in that room afterwards. Well, the restaurant closed, so we end up having dinner in the hotel restaurant, and I end up performing in Dave Remington's fucking hotel suite, like in the living room, standing on the fucking rug while everybody's at a dining room table. There's like 20 guys, and they're all, there's Kevin Mawai, who's a
former Jet.
Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Couple other guys that Dave Remington. I mean, these are like NFL players and random millionaires, and there's like 20 of them, and I'm just in this. But it went really well.
Good.
Good
deal. Listen, let's go ahead and bring on our guest. Part of the reason I reached out to this gentleman was not necessarily to talk about the tragic events that happened in Perry, but it got me to thinking, and I heard him on the radio a couple days later with a lot of things that these gentlemen and women have to deal with on an everyday basis, and some of the tragedy that they see. And I just thought it might be a good topic to bring them on, and let's talk about some of the things that they go through and what services that they have. So Sergeant Paul Parizek, Des Moines Police Department Public Information Officer, was kind enough to join us tonight. So Paul, we really appreciate you hopping on False Starts with us.
Hey, no problem, man. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So obviously we want to talk about, this is a mental health podcast, and goodness knows you guys see ungodly amounts of tragedy and things like that, and you probably have a lot to deal with. But before we get into that, before the show, I wanted to ask a couple questions very generically about this gambling investigation and some of the stuff that's broke today. Number one, I guess, two things. There's a narrative out there that law enforcement doesn't necessarily have to tell you the truth when they're asking you questions and things like that, which I understand that. But from what I gather from the released information today, one of the agents wasn't told that he wasn't given the correct information and didn't realize that he was actually not telling Isaiah Lee the correct information. So just, I guess my question is morally, where are we at with that? Because that seems a little unfair.
Well, I guess I'm not up to speed on the Isaiah Lee part. I've looked at a lot of the reports that have come out about this, and Van Plum is a very well-known attorney. Nobody has any reason to doubt anything he says in this case. He's not always necessarily one of our favorites sitting across the table, but the guy's got a solid reputation. Every time I've been around him, he's ethical, appropriate, and doing what the best he can for his clients. The things that kind of stood out to us on this, as we were, obviously we're on the outside looking in over at the Des Moines Police Department, but one of the things that was really stoking conversation in our office today was this report that, if it's true, that multiple supervisors told these agents, or this one agent, to knock it off, to not go forward, and to stop what he was doing. And we were all just shaking our heads. We can't believe that he just continued on, and can't really identify what would be the motivation to do that.
Right.
That if that happened in our building, somebody'd probably be looking for a job, or
right.
There'd certainly be some discipline. If you've got supervisors telling you not to do something, the reason they're supervisors and commanders is because they've been there before, and they have that wisdom, and they also have a little extra knowledge, a little more savvy about things that are going on in the community, and you follow their guidance. And sometimes I've had supervisors tell me to do something, and maybe it wasn't spot on a bullseye. It wasn't wrong, or they weren't leading me down the wrong path, but you do what your bosses tell you to do, and there's a reason for that.
Right.
But when it comes to, if you're interviewing someone, or if you're talking to, or if you're in interrogation, we typically don't ask a lot of questions we don't already have the answers to,
Mm-hmm.
but we also don't want to play all of our cards at the same time.
Right.
So there's an area there where you start talking about deceit, deception, and
right.
what's going on. So
let me read you the context here.
Okay.
So, because I brought it up. So, Special Agent in Charge Nelson conveyed to Special Agent Ludwig and others that the nature of this investigation was purely administrative, and their targets focused only on FanDuel, DraftKings, and other online gaming operators. At that point, Special Agent Ludwig interviewed Iowa State football player Isaiah Lee later in the morning and reassured Mr. Lee that the focus of the DCI's investigation was solely on online gaming operators and no adverse or criminal consequences would be forthcoming, and therefore secured Mr. Lee's statement. Special Agent Ludwig then reported his interview to his superior, Troy Nelson, who congratulated Special Agent Ludwig for obtaining a confession. Contrary to representations made to him and other special agents that morning, Agent Ludwig realized that the purpose of the investigation was actually criminal in nature, with the sole targets being male Division I student athletes of the University of Iowa State. He then advised his superiors that he would no longer participate in the investigation and requested reassignment.
Right. Okay, so that last piece I was aware with. Mark Ludwig is a class act. He's been an agent for a long time. I know him. He's a good guy. In that scenario that you just described there, he's only as good as the information that he's getting.
Right.
If he's acting in good faith, then he's not doing anything wrong.
Right.
Him circling back like he did once he realized, I think that speaks to his character and his
Agreed.
ethics as a police officer. So,
agreed. Yeah, there was a narrative out there today that it was okay that, I mean, obviously, when you're interrogating people and things like that, you can flub the truth and things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. What I think the crux of it here is this gentleman, Agent Ludwig, didn't think that he was doing that.
Right.
He unfortunately, his superiors didn't give him all the information, and that's the sad reality of that. So
yeah, and he is a class act, and interrogations are a weird thing, and it's when I think about it right now, I'm thinking about our Class A felonies. If we're doing a murder investigation, we're doing a sexual assault or something along those lines, and you're talking to somebody and they did it, you just don't necessarily have all the evidence at that point.
Right.
I mean, because that's where a lot of our stuff is. It's in that gray area where people have told us, but we don't have that piece
right.
to file that charge to get that probable cause. You might sit there and tell somebody, hey, listen, man, I know you did this, and there are reasons why I know you did this. I'm giving you an opportunity to explain yourself.
Right.
But yeah, this wasn't one of those cases. It doesn't sound like what all the evidence is. And, I think it's probably, there's going to be a ripple effect. I know the commissioner of the DPS, and he is a stand-up guy. I don't know if I'd want to be on the receiving end of what's going to come out of this as far as the administrative piece.
Right.
So, as in like the lead investigator getting disciplined, or?
Yes.
And who was that guy? What was that guy's name?
Starts with an S.
Sanger.
Yeah.
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 I looked his name. I think it was him. I looked up right away when his name first came out, and I saw he was like the keynote speaker at some thing at the Riverside Casino about sports. Like it was while this was going on, even like it was like, yeah, I'm going to tell y'all how to bust guys gambling on sport. Like it was, I mean, you could see it on the website. They were advertising it. And I was like, I feel like, could the motive just be pure jealousy that were talking? Like, here's why I think maybe, and this may be a really dumb example, but Chris, remember my argument on Keith Murphy's page a few days ago?
Yeah. Yep.
So Keith Murphy had posted how Phil Parker got a raise at Iowa, right? And I commented, worth every penny. And this guy comments about how it's ridiculous how much money these guys make and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, it's capitalism. It's relative. I mean, what are you going to do? And he's like, well, I've been farming for all these years, and basically saying he should make that much money for farming.
I know some farmers that do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But he's, more or less, I mean, could this guy be sitting there pissed off that amateur, these college athletes, now that they're getting NIL, gambling, could he be mad that they're making this money and he's got this prestigious job that he's not he should be a millionaire for doing his job?
I suppose it's a possibility. I've seen similar adolescent motives, and
yeah, it's very small.
Now, one of the things that we had heard today that came up in conversation as we were discussing this, and again, our focus was on the whole vibe in our conversation as we talked about this. And you've got some great minds in our building and some sports guys, and it was our focus was on how do you continue on after your bosses tell you no.
Well,
But,
yeah. That's
Watching too many movies about
well,
the
I
guy who had to bust the
or
crooked department,
or the conspiracy person in me says that somebody higher up had already okayed it and said go ahead and do it anyways.
Yeah, wow. I've seen those things happen too, and there's usually one or two people that know about it, and that's it.
Yeah,
but
right.
But one of the theories that we had heard, and again, rumor through the grapevine, whatever, is that he's a huge Huskers fan, and follows the Huskers around, and that this was motivated by some kind of Iowa hate, and that's why it started there.
Well, because you can't gamble in Nebraska,
and it seems so adolescent, but taking it down to real crime, a lot of times we were talking to people who have done some of the most serious crimes and some things that were just so hard for people like us to wrap our brains around. And you ask them why, and they're like,
right.
Yeah.
He looked at me wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
I mean,
very
could be
matter
anything.
of fact.
Right.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be an interesting, I think things are going to start falling more and more now that these depositions are coming out and whatever. But
one of the worst parts about it is that the DCI and the DPS as a whole are full of some of the best investigators and best police officers that you're going to find anywhere. And it's just like when somebody in our building does something dumb,
right?
Something wrong. The rest of us got to carry that weight. That's not fair.
Right.
And I have a lot of empathy, sympathy, both for them. That we work with every day that are going to have to shoulder this because it's going to keep coming up. It won't go away for a while.
And unfortunately, for the hundreds of things that you guys do good, the one side's going to grab this one narrative now and run with it and paint everybody with a broad brush, and that's just not fair.
No, not at all. And you talk. Well, here's a piece that we were talking about there. This geofence thing that has been a big piece of this. That is a valuable investigative tool that we use, and when used appropriately, it helps keep people safe. There have been large events that we have hosted in the city of Des Moines that we drop a geofence around, and we look for certain words like gun, fight.
Right.
I mean, the slang that might be exchanged in messages as people are getting ready to do something wrong.
Sure.
So, you don't want to lose that tool. And you also don't want to have it cast in this dark light because it's actually a valuable piece of public safety.
Well, and I can't imagine as much as that intrusive isn't the word I'm looking for, but as much as that can look into the things, I can't imagine that's an easy warrant to get.
Oh no.
Yeah, because of the privacy of that stuff. There has to be a damn good reason to get a warrant for that. I'm guessing if he would have went to a judge and said, I want to get a warrant to place this over here to see if anybody's gambling, he wouldn't have got it.
It depends on, exactly how deep you want to go, right? So if you just want to see if it's kind of like Facebook or any other social media platform, you can just get out there and look at, open source information. You can do that. And there are tools out there that you can use to suck in the information you're looking for. Everybody does it.
A basic search engine.
Yeah, well, and businesses do it. They pay for the analytics so they can see what people are talking about. You don't need a warrant for that kind of stuff. But when you want to start, the deeper you go, the more probable cause, the more legal justification you need to get into people's private business, and it needs to be that way. It's not that big of an obstacle for us if we have the evidence we need. I mean, getting a warrant's not hard if you have the evidence that you need. Yeah. And that's the way it should be.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to change the subject.
Yep, I'm ready.
How much when you get home from work, how much what do you watch on TV? If it's not sports, do you stay away from like true crime docs and shit like that? Can you? Because I gotta think Heather probably loves a true crime doc.
She's yeah, she loves
Yeah.
it.
And so what? I mean, do you want to
And
go
how
find the
often-
Kardashians or something? Is that what you want to do?
And
No,
how
you know,
often do you ruin it for her? Like that would never happen. They have to do this. You can't do like
Well,
you're
you
pulling
can't. The
curtains
true
back
crime
and ruin
docs,
it.
you can't ruin those. Those are real.
Well, like if we're watching the X-Files, I'm all in on that because I know
because that's fun.
that's out there.
Yeah.
No, that's what's there. But when you start looking at some of these crime well, let's just say, like if you're watching CSI or Law and Order,
Sure. Yeah. That's bullshit. I'm saying
you can break
like the
that stuff
true
down.
crime stuff.
So I can't think of what the name of it is, but it's one of these things that pops up like when we first turn our TV on and it's on that generic channel.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it's some crime thing like New Detectives, but it's all like from the 90s.
Reruns.
Yeah. But I mean, like from the 90s, like
Sure.
they're driving these cars and you're like, man, that looks like a spaceship. That
Right.
they don't have those anymore.
Old Crown Vics and stuff.
Oh, those, man, last Crown Vic I drove it forever.
Yeah.
Those things were a workhorse.
Yeah.
But we're watching that and we might have a little conversation about this has changed or that's changed or you
Sure.
can't do that now. But we actually had one come up the other day that was a Des Moines PD case. And it was one where our forensic team actually changed science as it was known then and really made some advancements on how you can get like fingerprints off of bodies.
Oh, wow.
Super glue fuming. Yeah, it was a huge case. But I knew the guys in it. And I'm watching this and I'm like, yeah, that guy, he's a knucklehead, That dude over there, he did all the work. He's the smart one. This guy was just there, The camera showed up, so he put on a suit, I mean,
that dude tripped over the body.
Yeah. Stuff like that. But when we come home, like we had a day today, and when you come home, you try to get away from it a little bit.
Shut it off.
Yeah,
That's what I'm.
And like the three of us can talk. Sports, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
That's where we go.
Right. Yeah, I wondered, because I mean, I just started watching. I just finished this one called the Curious Case of Natalia Grace, which is about this couple adopted a 6-year-old little person who they thought was 6.
Oh, no.
Keep
going.
And then the first night they have her, supposedly the mom sees pubic hair. So now they think that she's older, and it basically all just goes from there. I don't want to ruin it. But I have serious trauma from this that I need to work through after like this thing it's unbelievable. So I would encourage you, you can find it on HBO Max. I would encourage you and Heather to watch that together and you'll have plenty of conversation. I just like
I shouldn't watch it with her.
I love batshit crazy stuff. Like and so like I guess what that really brings me to, and I took a long time to get here, but what that really brings me to is, how often have you, I mean, I know your position has changed over the years, but I mean, how often has something just been so batshit fucking crazy you just laugh? Like,
oh shit.
Like gallows. I mean, I know there's gallows humor, and maybe you can't share too much of that, but like, I mean, how often are you just like, are you fucking kidding me?
Oh yeah. I worked at the Polk County Morgue for many years before I worked for Des Moines PD, and
what were you doing there?
We were part of the reception, like we were greeting people. That's not how it was.
You tied on the toe tags?
Yeah, I did. I filled them out and I tied them on. You know, and it actually was a really good experience to be able, because this is back Dr. Wooter's days.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay. Yeah.
I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Wooters,
Mm.
Dr. Garrity, you know, so you had some really great minds. And I mean, Dr. Wooters was an icon in this community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, you know, he did things his way. He wasn't probably what you would call a forensic scientist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was a medical examiner, but he had a bedside manner with families that it was probably one of the more valuable things you've ever seen when it comes to a medical professional.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Garrity, straight up forensic scientist. I couldn't tell sometimes if that dude liked me or if he just wanted to throw me on that table.
It's just facts.
Yeah.
Facts.
Like though I think one of the times that I did see him smile and laugh, I was like, "Oh man, is this it? Is he going to do me right here?" You know, you see things and you are like you can't wrap your brain around some of it, and some of it is the things that we do to ourselves, and some of it's the things that people do to each other. So and then there's when you start talking about the scope of emotion there, those are polar opposites, you know.
Yeah.
Because it's you know, there's a lot of just heartache when it comes to a lot of the things that we do to each other. But at the same time, you once you get into this business for a while, the compassion and the way you, like, we had a scene today that we were at downtown where a person had committed suicide, and their employer hadn't heard from him since Saturday. It sounded a little odd at the time, so I thought, well, maybe I should roll down there too. And as I stood there with these other officers in this apartment, you look around this apartment, you start to look at like how much effort they put into decorating their place to their style, their flavor, some of the precision and the pride that goes into that. And then you could also see there was some stuff that was broken, and you're like, you could feel the, just the frustration and the heartache and the, just the angst that they were probably feeling. And then to see this person, who hung themselves, you get to this point in this career where you can see this happening in your mind, and that's tough sometimes.
Like you almost put their day together in your head.
Yeah, because like I'm standing there and I'm looking at the calendar on the wall, and there's appointments through the rest of the month,
right?
And it's I don't know, it's I can't even really say how you want. It's surreal to a certain point,
sure, but
there's also, it doesn't. 30 years in, you still feel like, man, this isn't what's happening here. This can't. Yeah. There's got to be something more,
right?
And despite having all the answers right in front of you,
I think there's another piece to that people don't realize, in that you leave a scene like that, and your officers leave a scene like that, and they get another call, they have to be able to flip a switch.
Oh yeah.
And reset, and how hard that can be. And I related a little bit to when I was going, when I had cancer and I would go to chemo every Monday. It dawned on me about 4 weeks in, these nurses make a connection with the people that are in there, and they're smiling and very accommodating and whatever. But I know that they probably have made connections with people that all of a sudden didn't show up anymore because they didn't make it.
Right.
And they have to flip a switch. So I can't imagine how hard that is for you to be able to have to do that in an instant sometimes.
Yeah, there's probably the difference that stands out when you start talking about the medical profession. A lot of those nurses probably knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And they see their role as comfort. I'm going to make this person as comfortable as I possibly can until that moment comes. I just want them happy. And there's something so noble about that. You're right. With us, it's unexpected. You just don't know.
Right.
And you do have to flip that switch. And one of the things that we we impress upon our young officers, our newest ones, is that you may be at a scenario or a situation like what I just described to you. You might be at a homicide or a fatal crash, and you're soaking in all this horrible imagery, and
Right.
you're trying to process that, and then the way it impacts the people who are around you, and then you might have to go talk to somebody about their stolen bicycle. And
Right.
but what you have to remember is, for everybody in those two scenarios, that's the worst day of their life right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the
Right.
worst thing that's going on. I mean, this is the most important thing that's happening to all of them. Their bike got stolen and their buddy got killed.
Yeah.
And if you can look at it like that, and that's why we emphasize hiring character and then training skill. If we can hire good people, it doesn't matter where they come from. If they've got some compassion, if they've got the ethics, if they've got good character, we can train them everything else. Because when it gets right down to the moments when you really need it, that character is what's important.
I that's good to hear. I mean, because I've actually said that when I've had different arguments about, like, even way back during like the BLM movement, and when that was hot and heavy, and different scenarios like that, where I've always said that's what cops 90% of the time, and maybe even more so, whoever they're dealing with them on their worst day.
Oh yeah.
And if our cops, like, if you just look at numbers, people are labeled as minorities for a reason, because they're the minority. That means there's less of them, right? And so if that's going to bear itself out when in the numbers of every profession. So if we're a predominantly white city, then our officers are going to be predominantly white, and the percentages are probably going to be the same as in every other place. And so if you've got a predominantly white group of people who never deal with black people on a daily basis, other than on their worst day, because up until then, that's all they knew, right? And so, like, of course, that group of people becomes a bigger threat to them because it's a foreign thing. It brings more fear.
And that there's truth to that, but that's what the basis of our bias training is. Is to understand that the things you just described exist. To understand that
the unconscious bias.
Yes,
right.
we all come into this with that, and it doesn't matter who you are, you've got it.
Yeah.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, I just started digging into a book that I would recommend everybody reads, but it's called Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. And it actually breaks down a lot of different criminal cases, and to where a lot of this boils down to, we don't know who we're talking to. And if we knew who we were talking to, things would change.
100%.
Right.
It also kind of justifies or explains a lot of the policing strategies that we've had that people who don't understand policing don't get. For example, I worked the East Side for a long time. Bill, you're familiar.
Yeah.
If I go rolling up to Hard Times East and there's a fight, and I'm like, yo, sir, can you please calm down? It'd be a lot easier for us to communicate if you would just kind of notch it down a little bit. How effective is that going to be, other than if I roll up there and I'm like, yo, shut the fuck up, man?
Yeah.
We got things we need to do.
Yeah.
All right. So, those are little things that are so important to understanding the nuances of how we can effectively police, and
reading the audience.
Yeah.
Knowing the crowd, knowing your crowd. Like, there's and that's a great example. Like, there's de-escalate versus escalate. And I wonder how many officers have probably learned that lesson the hard way about their approach. Like,
I started in 91, man. I learned a lot the hard way.
You'll love this. So I've talked about this on this podcast because I talked about it a whole bunch with my therapist yesterday too. This year at Kinnick Stadium, I've completely cussed out 2 different cops on 2 different occasions because you know me, I'm a lunatic. I'm not a threat in any way, shape, or form. I do lose control of my mouth, but I've never, whatever. I don't lose control of myself, but I look like I want to fight somebody, but I'm also having a really good time. I know I look like that. It's like if you watch the national championship game, the Michigan national championship game, they showed Jalen Rose in the crowd, right? Mm-hmm. And he's in the crowd he's talking like that's what I look like, but I'm having fun.
Oh, I've seen you on TV.
Yeah, exactly. So
Jalen didn't have the chains.
Yeah, that's true. But at one point, there was one cop that came over and he's like, you need to calm down. And I've been sitting there for 5 years, 6 years, ever since that.
It's my favorite photo ever. I just love it. Actually, I was trying to find the one where he's screaming and his veins are popping out.
Yeah, that one. And you know what? I'm screaming. So I'm W. My section is W when they go IOWA after a score. I'm screaming W. That's why my hands are like this. I'm like W. It's after a touchdown. But it looks like I'm yelling at somebody like I want to fight. But anyway,
welcome to our world.
I've had over the years, most of the officers that have come up and said something to me were jovial. They were like, they were worried about my health. Like they'd make a joke as if I'm going to have a heart attack or, whatever. And we laugh it off. And they kind of know me. And there's a dude that fist bumps me before every game and all this stuff. But then there's these other guys that this year, they were new this year. And so the one guy comes over and just, you need to calm down. And I can't stand people that are acting like they're in charge of me when they're not. So I give the guy credit because he probably could have taken me to jail for disorderly conduct at the very least. I mean, that seems like a pretty loose, because when I said right away, not going to happen. I'm not going to calm down. I've been sitting here forever. You just got here. These are, I'm the goddamn mayor of the North End Zone. These are my people. But I employ you as the mayor of the North End Zone. But so eventually, I'm talking to my buddy, I'm calling him all kinds of little bitches, and I'm all mad at him. And I apologized to him the following week. He was there again. So I apologized the following week and, was like, yeah, I got to be better, blah, blah, blah. Another guy later on says something to me, told me I was being a dick during the, and I do the same thing. So how come they didn't? I mean, because they could, at Kinnick Stadium, you can literally just call a number and say somebody's bothering you and they'll come and make them leave.
That's not uncommon at a lot of stadiums. There's a hotline you can either text.
Yeah, which is bullshit because they don't even have to have any evidence.
Well, the way I've understood it, and I don't know if it operates that way. I don't think you just get to say, hey, somebody needs to leave, because everybody in that moment has the right to be there. Now you have to also absorb the fact that those venues are something you can get tossed out of.
Right.
But the way I've understood it and the way I've always operated, and I work at a lot of sporting events, is that that's a last resort. I mean, I've worked for the iCubs for almost 10 seasons.
Yeah.
And I arrested one person in that time, and it happened last summer, and it was a drunk driver.
Oh, just coming out of the parking lot or something.
Yeah, he almost ran me over.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, yeah. Ask Heather, because she
wrong guy.
Yeah. Heather and my daughter were both there and watched it happen. And, Heather doesn't necessarily have an easy button.
Right.
Things like that happen. What you just described in the North End Zone, That was happening in the parking lot at Second. She was on our side.
Yeah.
I was de-escalating my wife while this
Right,
other
yeah,
guy
yeah.
picked up for OWI.
Yeah.
I got it.
But you made an interesting point there. You brought up an interesting piece when you talk about de-escalation.
Yeah.
And
he could have approached me differently.
De-escalation is something. It's been happening. I wish I was the guy who came up with the term community policing, because I'd have stamped a trademark on that and I'd have been a millionaire.
Yeah.
Same thing with de-escalation. We've been doing it for years. I mean, decades. It's just always been called it
wasn't labeled properly.
It was verbal judo or tactical speech or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But the thing that a lot of people don't understand about it is it's not some Jedi mind trick or we're not going to walk up and like blow fairy dust on you and say, ooh, you're de-escalated and you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Right.
It's human.
It's something that we offer you. We offer you, hey, listen, we would like to do this. Would you like to do it with us? And let's do it together. And that's what de-escalation is. And, it's one of those words that's just been, taken off and on down the road. But yeah, starting off by saying you need to calm down. That's one of the first things you learn in husband school. Never say your wife. Can you just can you chill out? You need to calm down. No, that doesn't work.
That actually happened in this house 2 days ago. I was trying to fix something and I was getting angry at the situation, and Jordan walks in and he goes, you just calm down. And I instantly snapped on him. And so later on, I was like, listen, when somebody's angry, the last thing you want to tell them is to calm down. Like that's not the phrase you want to use, because instantly that made me even angrier.
One of the first things you need to do is in those scenarios, like I've always told folks, and this was again before we really got deep into this training, what I learned from growing up in a household where there was high dynamics and some substance abuse that with my parents that kind of worked its way out on the way down the road. But one of the things you always wanted to do is say, hey, what can I do to help you? Or I can't hear what you're saying right now because of the way you're saying it.
Right.
Maybe we, all those things. What's it going to take for me to get you to get in this police car? I mean, that's one of those other things. You give people an opportunity to feel like they're making the choices. Like Bill said, he doesn't want somebody who doesn't have power or control over him trying to exercise power and control.
Right. That's what I was talking about with my therapist yesterday, because that's one of my triggers, which we decided yesterday goes clear back to getting molested when I was 6, which we've talked about on here a long time ago. So, it's not, we don't need to get into all that, but that lack of control, like that was something that I never thought affected me. I've only in the last couple of years uncovered where that has had some type of long-term effects on me. And I think that's part of one of my triggers, because being 6 years old at the time, and the way that scenario started out was with him saying that I did something where I had to go apologize to him, and me knowing that wasn't true, but all the adults around me telling me that I was lying because I didn't want to get in trouble. So then I had to go apologize for something I didn't do, so on and so forth. So I think that did something to me, where anytime someone tries to exercise control over me, or it gave me the desire to be heard, I need people to believe what I'm saying.
Right.
And I think it goes way back there. And I've only just now discovering that that's where it comes from, because I've been that way my entire life.
Yeah. And without a doubt, I think we all probably have stories that are maybe not same circumstances,
sure,
but similar. The power dynamics in relationships are probably the crux of a lot of therapy. What brings people there, whether it's the power dynamics in a marriage, between men and women, or adults and children, or scenarios where it's the police and a citizen. Power dynamics are at the root of a lot of um, trauma and misunderstandings, that handled differently could probably, we wouldn't have those issues. Again, I'm not trying to sell this book, but this Talking to Strangers talks a lot about that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think that sounds fantastic. I would definitely want to check it out. Because these are all, part of why I mean, I've talked about that scenario on this podcast before because I want to be open about it. I want, I try not to bring things down. Part of my goal with this podcast is to have a good time talking about hard things. And sometimes it's going to get harder and more serious than others. But I bring that up just to kind of, use it, maybe not quite as an excuse, but kind of an example of what I'm working through now, because I'm hoping that, this sounds stupid kind of, but it's kind of a weird goal I'm setting for myself that makes me
goals.
I want next football season, I don't want anything like that to happen. Like
you need baby steps, Bill.
I want to be I want to be better. I mean, I am not gonna. There is no way I'm gonna calm down during the game, but I do need to be a little more respectful of the people around me, because, like, being in the front row, everybody that sits to my right, they've been sitting there with me the whole time. They're my friends at this point. I'm like Uncle Billy to their kids, and like we're all lunatics. And they don't give a shit what comes out of my mouth. Like, they love me. And then immediately to my left will be whoever I bring to the game with me. Well, to the left of them, like the next several seats are different every week. It's some company has them, somebody has them, but it's always different people. And so sometimes there's a little kid there. Sometimes there, it depends. And most of the time I have a great rapport with them and we have a great time. But maybe if there's a 6-year-old girl 3 seats down from me, I don't yell at the ref that his wife's fucking the mailman right now. Like, I have to be better than that.
God.
That
with this, we always hit this one part of the podcast where I feel like
that's
now
a good goal.
To take a break.
Yeah. Well, right? Like that cop with that, if that cop would have came up to me and said, "How can I help you right now?" I would have said, "You can take that gun and shoot that fucking referee that just called that a fair catch." That's what
okay. So I can work with that. I'm not going to go out and do that to the referee, but I can. Right. I'm like, hey, yeah, man, that's not going to happen right now because we kind of need him to keep this game going.
Yeah. So, and then it ends up being a funny interaction, probably, is what happened.
And I'm telling you, and I see this every day, all the time. I've been doing it for years. Those are some of the moments that totally pivot, a tense situation.
Yes.
I'll tell you, this one got some news coverage recently. We were still in short sleeves, and I remember I was sweating, so it was sometime towards the end of the summer. But I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Windsor Heights brought a car chase into the city. Guy had a bunch of warrants, I think parole violation. I think he knew he was going to go back to prison. He ends up on the west side, about 13th and Carpenter area. Bails out of his car, takes off running down an alley right as I'm coming up towards University. He runs over and he's on a bridge, the University Avenue Bridge over Keogh Way.
Oh, yeah.
You may have seen this on KCCI because they were able to swing their camera on their tower around and zoom in on us.
Oh, wow.
And the story came down to this kid. He's an adult, but
young guy.
Yeah, young dude.
Man.
Younger than us.
Yeah.
He's threatening to jump off the bridge. He's straddling the bridge. He's on the phone with his mom, and it's myself and one other police officer at that moment. And I had called to see if any of our crisis workers were on the street, mobile crisis cops. We don't put those civilians into those scenarios because it can get dicey. But see if Sergeant Garcia or Mike Miller, somebody was on the road that could come up there, and we had a pretty decent rapport going with this guy, and he wanted a lighter, so he could smoke a cigarette. This other cop that was there, a younger guy, but I've worked around him before, knows what he's doing, good dude, says, yeah, I got a lighter. And he comes over and he brings a lighter. And mind you, we're standing on University and there's a brick railing there, sidewalk, and then where he's hanging over the fence. As that younger officer reaches out with the lighter, the guy goes to grab the lighter. This cop tries to grab him and he's like, he scoots back. He's like, he saw that coming. And he was hot. That other cop right away said, hey, I realize I made a mistake, and he leaves. And I'm like, I got this. So we're talking, and this guy's telling me, man, hey, don't try. And I said, dude, listen, look at me. I'm 55 years old. I am not jumping over this railing so I can fight with you.
Right.
Well, that's the last thing that's going to happen.
Right.
So let's work from there. And that was, something like that's able to bring this back down to where it needs to be. And it happens every day. They talk about de-escalation. This is something where I will die on this hill for our cops, that, when we're pushing 200,000 public contacts a year, and you look at there were 250 some shootings in the city last year. I was just looking, we took 694 guns off the street. That's 694 armed encounters that didn't result in a shooting.
Yeah.
Right.
Our cops are de-escalating their asses off. We have our use of force percentage is less than 1%. So less than 1% of nearly 200,000 encounters a year result in a use of force. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing when you think about what we're going up against. And it's because we have the resources that, I think Chris wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
A lot of it, our mobile crisis team. And these are our outward facing pieces.
Yeah, Paul, let's get a break, because that's where I wanted to transition after the break, is to talk about your crisis teams.
I didn't know we got a break.
Yep. So I'm going to take a real quick break.
About 30 seconds.
Yeah. Get a word from Revelton Distilling Company and from Gravitate Co-working, and then we'll come back.
I'm going to grab drinks. I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Why take the best corn in the world and make it into fuel when you could make it into whiskey? That's the question that launched Revelton, Iowa's most visible and fastest growing distillery. Owners Rob and Christy Taylor embrace the grain-to-glass philosophy, sourcing ingredients locally and overseeing on-premises production and bottling at their facility in Osceola. One sip, and you'll agree that Revelton's handcrafted whiskeys, gins, and vodkas are the best you've ever tasted. And with the launch of their rye whiskey, made with 100% Iowa-grown rye and corn, and their new bourbon coming soon, there's more Revelton to love than ever. Iowa's own Revelton Distillery. ReveltonDistillery.com. The great thing about working from home is working from home. The worst thing is working from home, especially for face-to-face collaborations with customers and coworkers. And let's face it, coffee shop meetings are neither private nor professional. So skip the trip to Starbs and investigate Gravitate Co-working Space. For more than 10 years, Gravitate has provided large and small office and conference spaces perfect for hosting meetings, workshops, or other events, as well as private phone booths for confidential conversations. Plus, all spaces include secure fiber internet, free coffee, and access to a kitchenette. All you need is your laptop. Gravitate does the rest. And renting space at Gravitate is surprisingly affordable. An hour of office space costs about the same as venti caramel macchiatos and breakfast sandwiches for two. Daily and monthly rates are also available with no long-term commitment. Learn more at gravitatecoworking.com. That's gravitatecoworking.com.
All right, and we're back. Thank you to our sponsors, Revelton Distilling Company, Gravitate Co-working. Revelton, I noticed, published a photo on their social media today. Batch number 3 of their rye whiskey is about ready to be released, and I know sometime in the next 2 months their first batch of bourbon is going to get released as well. So got to grab a couple of these comments real quick. We were talking about husband and wife dynamics and not telling them to calm down. Apparently Denny's way to do it is to tell her to calm down and make a sandwich. I don't necessarily think that's a great idea. That seems like not a de-escalation tool. Is that right, Paul?
Well, he's trying to distract her. That might work.
Right.
You have to calm down and say, "Hey, can you make me a sandwich?"
Right. So before the break, we started to talk about part of the thing that I wanted to have you on was obviously the stuff that you guys go through and what services are available that you and your first responders have available. But when you were on Heather's show on the drive, I think last week you had talked about what's available to the public as well. So let's dive into some of that.
So the public piece is probably the most visible, as it should be, obviously, just like with everything else we do. So we got what we call a mobile crisis response team, and we have actually had that for over 2 decades. So this is one of the frustrating things as a PIO when we were talking about some of the 2020 stuff and some of the demands that were being made that you have to train your officers, crisis intervention training, all these different things. We've been doing them. I think the latest piece of when they were talking about the 8 can't wait, the latest piece of that had been in place in our department since 2017. And, maybe we didn't do such a great job, back then letting people know, but the mobile crisis response team is specially trained police officers. Now, keep in mind, we all get crisis intervention training, whether it's in the academy or in service training. And it's something that we keep up on. We have to, because there's so many calls that are mental health related these days. Even when you get called on, a fight, it's not uncommon to find that there's some kind of a pre-existing diagnosis that's contributing to the conflict. But we roll with social workers. That's a co-response unit. So there are calls that police officers have taken for years, but now we bring a social worker or a mental health nurse with us. And again, we've been doing that for over 2 decades. But what we most recently added was what we call our CARE team, the Crisis Advocacy Response Effort. And the CARE team are same thing, mental health nurses, social workers that will take calls to the police department and they'll respond without a police officer. We've realized over the years that not every welfare check, because somebody's down and didn't go show up for work, you don't need to send a cop. It
might be better not to.
Yes,
right.
That was exactly where I was going with that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that oftentimes our presence, depending on what's going on, escalates.
Just by being there.
It's like, man, hey, I had a bad day yesterday. I didn't feel like going to work. I know I'm not answering the phone, and why the hell are you here?
Yeah.
But we took it one step further, and I think it still stands that we were the second police department in the nation to do this, but we've actually put a mental health clinician in our communication center. So a lot of these calls right now are getting handled by phone. It's almost like telehealth.
Sure.
We've got a special space for them in our communication center. We had to.
Is that a team or is that like just a person?
Well, in the communication center, it's one person, but there's also there's a CARE team on the street at the same time.
Gotcha.
So you've got 2 different teams operating now that, because there are some calls that they're not.
And these are not officers, right?
Nope. Social.
How do they get, how does somebody get that job?
Very good. Give me a good hook here. We've got a hell of a solid partnership with Broadlawns Medical Center.
Okay.
So that's where that staffing comes from. It's they hire, they train, then they bring them into us. It's a really fantastic group. If you maybe scroll back maybe a week or so on our Facebook page, we gave them a shout out at the police department for the work that they do, and because they're, it's like anything else that once somebody realizes you have, man, there's a demand for it.
Yeah, they
have the supply. Let's go now.
Is this something that like someone goes and applies at Broadlawn specifically for this?
Yep.
And so, like, do they need a degree?
I don't know what their hiring standards or what the requirements are, but I would assume it'd be the same if you were going to work in a clinical setting.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to have a driver's license.
Right. Well, I mean, honestly, that sounds like, it probably isn't because it's social work and because it's Broadlawns. I mean, Broadlawns is kind of a government funded hospital, but I can't imagine it's
I'll tell you,
the most lucrative thing in the world, but
well, anytime you get into social services, you're not going to get rich. And
right.
I mean, I think those folks get in there for the right reasons.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like a job I would like.
Yeah,
that sounds like something I would like to do.
I just saw a comment float across the screen there about Broadlawns being the epicenter for mental health. I worked at Broadlawns for 10 years, and I can't even begin to describe the effort and how noble the people who work there are in being that spot for people, for the underserved. I mean, it's just the way it works. But man, day in, day out, showing up. We've got a group on Facebook called I think it's Broadlawns Alumni Group or something. But you see people who've worked there 40 years, and I mean, it's probably some of the best experience I ever had, particularly when it comes to understanding circumstances and not understanding that someone isn't always their circumstances.
And how do you? I know that we have talked about this before. Well, you know what? Actually, we should stay. I don't want to change the subject right now. We should stay on this actually, just because it's important. Now, how many calls? Like you mentioned having 250 shootings, however many calls a year. How many calls now that you guys have this care team? How much weight has that taken off of you guys? Like, how many calls a month would you say does that save the Des Moines Police Department from having to deal with?
Well, you're gonna make me put on my glasses and look here, because I just got this email the other day. Here we go. Comm Center annual stats. So here you go, hot off the presses.
That's really intimidating. Like you're getting arrested. Hold on a second. I got to read your license.
Yeah, if I'm putting on my glasses, man, you might as well just start running, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is kind of timely because we did go into a little bit today because we're actually hiring dispatchers, which is not part of this conversation.
Right.
We were talking about all their phone calls and just the volume of work up there. So where is the care team? Okay, here we go. Care and Mobile Crisis. So we started them, I want to say it was just before the second quarter of the care team, just before the second quarter of the year. And
this year?
Yep. Mm-hmm. So of 2023.
Gotcha.
And so the mobile crisis officer, that co-response that we talked about. So like you may have a suicide threat where maybe they have a plan and that plan might involve a weapon. So you're gonna send a police officer along. Doesn't mean we stay. We may take off.
But it's a safety thing because of the weapon.
Yeah, it's just like with the firefighters, if they're responding to a shooting, they don't go until we.
Yeah, you don't want a civilian dealing with an armed person.
Yeah, because nobody's getting help then, right?
Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to that co-response, there were 4,391 calls. The care team, their field response, so that's the care team going without a police officer, going out to take care of it themselves, 882, and then the phone calls and dispatch the calls they handled just by phone, like the telehealth type of thing, 551. So the total mental health diversion as far with our calls for service was 5,800, so close to 6,000. That's huge. When you look at, I mean, their total phone calls coming into dispatch last year, 492,000, almost 500,000.
Wow.
And that was a 5% increase over last year. Now, when you look at the care team, because we started them in 2023, obviously they're 100% more than what we did last year because we didn't have them. But looking at it as we move forward over the next few years, that's probably going to be one of the most valuable resources that we have and that we have to offer.
I think
literally help is just a phone call away.
I think that's a great asset too. Like in general, I think that it seems to me like the Des Moines Police Department is doing a lot of the right things as far as adjusting to just the way society changes,
Right. And the
you know,
culture's changing
in the
and
way, yeah. I mean, like, to me, like when people are saying things like defund the police, when they're going to like ridiculous levels like that, when people say things like that, actually what you guys are doing is what should be being done.
Right.
The more things that can be dealt with without police involved, the better.
Sure.
But the problem is so many people, their first phone call is the cops because they don't know who else to call. 911's just what they call.
Okay, and to take this a step further, when you look at a lot of the programs that we run, particularly when we talked about our Police Activities League, which now is entirely donation funded, other than the employees.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those were programs that somebody else started, and for whatever reason, whether it was finance, whether it was staffing, or just commitment, no, somebody else couldn't run. And then, hey, who's here 24/7? Well, the cops. You know, and we're not really good at saying no when it comes to this, so we'll take on these programs, and it's really, really good. But we've got to get other people involved, and that's what we've been doing, and it's working out really well. But when you talk about the police doing all these things to adjust to the culture and just the way our society's changing, the greatest challenge that as a police organization that we have is we still got to do police work too. There's still bad guys out there.
Yeah.
So somehow helping our community understand that we need to do all of this, the outreach that we're doing, and find different ways, whether it's juvenile court diversion or mental health diversion. That's all great, but there are still people out there that are going to need us to jack them up, take them to jail.
Yeah.
I mean, they still exist.
Well, and that's kind of the point. The more you guys can focus on the bad guys, the better.
Well, and that it needs to happen.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I just shared on social media today, that a stat that kind of stood out to me, and I got some commentary from the chief on it to add, was that our arrests of felons in possession of firearms went up 28% last year. All right. So as we start talking about gun problems, the lowest hanging fruit that we can go after is a felon who has a gun because they aren't supposed to have one.
Right.
It's not a 2A issue. It's not anything else. But to see that number rise like that, there's two pieces to it. Our cops are doing a great job identifying these targets and going after them. But there's a lot of guns out there.
Yeah. Well, and also it could also be a little bit of a ripple effect of having things like the care team and having things like that, so that you guys have more time to deal with getting firearms out of felons' hands. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, when you're talking about 500,000 calls in a year, 1,400 or 5,000 of them don't seem like that much of a difference maker. But that's 5,000 calls that you guys are able to focus elsewhere.
Right. And think about this also. It may not numerically seem like a big impact, but a lot of those calls are very time consuming. Because think about the conversation that needs to happen to be effective at all. And that was one of the things I remember, when like my partner is a great guy, Danny White. He's
quarterback from the Cowboys.
He'd like to be. He wears the jersey. Let me tell you. And he's been to the motherland. He's that guy. But he works up in our detective bureau now. I mean, he had probably one of the best. He could talk to anybody under any circumstances. But man, when it got to that point where he was done, and something was going to happen. And a lot of times, it's because we had time constraints. You're you've
Okay,
got,
I can't. This is going in too much of a circle. I can't. We
yeah,
can't do
and
anything. Yeah.
right, and the other thing you have to think about is, we work. Law enforcement is structured on a priority system. All right, and we have priorities. I think they go 0 to 9 now with our calls. A priority 0 is the exact opposite of what it sounds like. That's the everybody drop what they're doing. It doesn't matter what you're doing, and you're shooting at East High School. Everybody's going. And then the significance goes down as you go. But we work on a structured priority system, and it doesn't matter how many phone calls are coming in. If there's a priority 1, somebody is dropping what they're doing and going and taking care of that. And a lot of these calls, when we start talking about mental health issues or juvenile issues, those problems started 2-3 years before that person ever picked up the phone and called us. We're not going to fix it in 5 minutes.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. So 5,800 calls, it may not sound a lot when you're talking about 500,000, but when you look at the time invested and the outcome is going to be something that we're watching really, really closely. And being partnered with Broadlawns is going to give us that opportunity because they're able to follow them through aftercare.
Yeah.
Well, and to Bill's point earlier, with the defund of police and things like that, those are the programs that are going to go first.
You're right. Yeah, and here's the other thing.
Well, those are the programs to me those are the programs that are accomplishing what people that say defund
100%
want.
Right. But what I think that they don't understand is that when you defund those are the programs that are unfortunately getting cut.
Sure.
Because those aren't essential police functions.
Right.
But we're supporting those right now, and we're sustaining them, and we want to continue to do that. We want to because the outreach opportunities of us having those moments with people changes lives, and it also, if we are effective at that, then that's going to carry on when we're gone. Yeah. So we want to have those opportunities. The biggest concern this is a whole nother conversation, Chris, but one of the bigger concerns when it comes to the defund thing is that technology is out budgeting police departments. I mean, it took us over $1 million just to get our body camera program off the ground.
Yep.
And that was in 2017. The prices are going through the roof, and we have to sustain it. There are actually police departments now that are dealing with critics who want them to get rid of their body cameras because, 1, it's too expensive, and 2, they're using them to prosecute too many people. It's having the opposite effect,
of course,
of what they wanted. There's not all these bad cops out there.
Yeah.
Right.
Holy shit! Now they got
actually proven shit.
Right.
Yeah. Well, like I had a thing actually recently where a prosecuting attorney pulled me into a room and was trying to discourage me from testifying. It ended up not going to court. It ended up not happening. But anyway, it was an ex-roommate of mine. And it was a domestic thing where he ended up being arrested for allegedly beating up his girlfriend. Right. Well, this happened in my house. The incident happened in my house. It was in his room. So all I heard was noise. I didn't, witness anything.
Right.
And so the way I understood it was like he had called the cops on her, and the cops came, didn't take anybody away at the time. So I thought that was it. Well, later on that night, I'm getting ready to leave town. And later on that night, they come to my house to get him. And they were slick about this shit too, man. They came up, they opened the door, or I opened the door, and my dog, at the time, this was my old dog Jax, who was 140 pounds, this massive, huge dog, and had a loud bark, and so the dog's going nuts when they knock on the door. So I step outside, and I heard nothing. I mean, there was 4 of them. There was no car anywhere, no nothing. I was like, holy shit. And they asked for her, who obviously didn't live here, and I'm like, well, she doesn't live here. I don't, well, are you? So, they asked if I was my roommate, and I'm like, And there was one guy that was kind of looking at me like, you him, that kind of, oh, you're that kid. Oh, you guy beats up girls. He had that fucking attitude, but whatever. He was fine. I get it. And he was, so anyway, he was, there. So then I go, no. And they go, well, can we talk to him? So and I go in and get him. And the next thing I know, they're cuffing him up like he walks out. I was like, oh, man, I didn't know about that one. Oh, they got me.
Thanks a lot, Bill.
But anyway, at the time, as they were taking him away, they asked me if I was here when everything happened, if I knew what happened. And I said no. And it was because I just didn't want to get involved. I didn't know how far any of this was going to go. I didn't want to get involved. Yeah, no, I don't know shit. And so then fast forward, it's going to go to court, all that stuff. She says, she's like, we've got you on camera saying that you were there. So why didn't you say anything at the time? Why didn't you say that you didn't do this at the time? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, and when I get involved, she takes me in, shows me the video, because I was like, no, I didn't. And then sure enough, there I am. No, I wasn't here.
I'll tell you.
And she says like, well, see, cause I can get, trying to threaten me with perjury, which I'm not a fucking idiot. I was like, it's not perjury because I lied to the cops. It's perjury if I lie in court. Like, I'm not stupid, so I went on with it, but there you go, buddy. I didn't remember. I swear to God, I was like, I have no idea. And then boom, there he is. Yeah, no. I lied to him.
The video thing is, there was a lot of resistance to it when we first got it, because cops were like, oh, they're spying on us and all.
Yeah. It feels Big Brother-ish. I
sure
get it.
did.
Yeah.
It sure did.
It's like truck drivers being GPS'd. They don't want that shit
takes
either.
It takes one time that saves your ass, and then you're like, this is the greatest thing ever. And that's all it took for me, was one time where I said, no, I didn't do that. And it was long story, but it was a pretty violent incident, and it was getting ready to go to federal court. I mean, it was bad, and this guy got hurt, and I said everything I did I needed to do. And good detective found some video of the incident inside a bar, and it totally saved me. I mean, it proved that I told the truth, and I did everything by the book, did what I had to do, nothing more. It was unfortunate that what happened to this cat, but you get that one incident and you're like, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah,
I'll bet. All right, we're gonna get you off here, Paul. I know that appreciate your time and giving us your time and for what you do for the city and things like that. It's very important. So
yeah, and this kind of rolled out exactly how you said it would. That Bill'd go off on a tangent and we'd have conversation and never get down to where we started our conversation. But if you ever want to revisit some of the internal workings of our peer support team and what we do for cops in crisis and to deal with the day-to-day traumas, I'd be more than happy to join you again.
I'm sure that we could carve out 2 or 3 more episodes. Maybe we'll have.
Are you saying we didn't cover everything? I thought.
Dude, I know more about you now than I ever did, and I thought I knew you pretty well. and we didn't even have to get into the fact that I don't like it because I'm a Cyclone.
I would just like it pointed out that when he said that they do that symbol when they score a touchdown, and I refrained from saying that wasn't very often this year. So I would just I would like credit that I didn't take the low road and take a shot.
Except you passive aggressively just did it because
I'm really fucking good.
You're a typical bitch ass Cyclone fan that does things that way.
That's right.
Instead of just coming right out and saying it.
That's right.
Goddamn passive aggressive little fucking girl. No,
dude, this whole thing is black and gold. That I look at.
I know. All right, we can wrap this up now.
Right. So, thanks a lot for the invite.
Thank you, Paul.
Absolutely, man. Yep. And I do want to say quickly, and Paul and I have had other conversations at different times. I have always been one of the more challenging probably friends that you've had. I mean, because I asked the questions, but Paul has always given a very clear, concise, intelligent, well thought out answer. I am personally so happy that you're the face of our police department, because I've seen what it looks like elsewhere,
Right.
and we really are very fortunate to have you and the type of police department we have. I know that there's people out there that won't agree with me,
for sure.
But there's always going to be improvement that can be made all across the board. And I believe when it comes to mental health and when it comes to, evolving, I do think that the Des Moines Police Department is up there at the very top. And I hope that you guys know that and you keep moving in that direction.
There's a lot of conversation in our building every day about what we do to try to stay at the tip of the spear when it comes to law enforcement. And I appreciate what you're saying about, our communication strategies. It's something that I've learned along the way, and we work really hard at. And one thing that I want to make sure everybody understands, day in and day out, my primary goal as the PIO and running the media office is to make sure that you understand and that you have enough information and context to understand why we make the decisions that we do.
Right.
We're more than happy to have the conversations if you disagree or if you don't understand. But like you said, being able to give those answers and explain the process and what we're up against and where we're trying to go, that's our goal. We just want people to understand.
Well, and I'll close out and just say that there's not, in my opinion, a more transparent organization than your guys's. I don't know of any other city that has a weekly segment on a radio station where people can call in and ask any question that they want.
There's a lot of police departments that are jealous of that.
And contrary to popular belief that was narrated a couple weeks ago, you guys give as much information as you possibly can without jeopardizing investigations. And I would much rather see that and make sure that you're doing it right and not giving out wrong information,
sure,
so that the bad guys can be put away. So kudos.
And we also, you got to make sure you're maintaining the privacy and the dignity of crime victims.
Absolutely.
So it is a tightrope to walk, but we do our best. And these moments like this, being able to have these candid conversations really help. So this is no different than what we do at KXNO, man. Candid conversation and back and forth, and it's great, and I appreciate it, and I'm sure the rest of our folks do too.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you again, man.
Yeah,
thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate it. Go ahead and make sure you subscribe, rate us, as the Hot Mess Happy Hour ladies say, rate us a 5. If not, keep that shit to yourself. So with that, we are out of here.